Greetings. This is Duke Violation, and I am kicking out a quick video because Presto from Noble's Chat, as well as some other people, are asking some questions about how the housing permissions work in Shot of the Avatar. I've done a lot of playing around with the housing, so just wanted to kind of basically show that process real quick. Give an explanation to the tier system and answer any questions that people might have. So, starting off, certain items don't have all the permissions. So what I'm at right now is a crafting station. This crafting station, if you notice, has a permission list that is only talking about the item. So this is important to understand the difference between the item permissions and the container permissions. So the item is what it is itself, the asset, not what's within the asset, but the asset. So in this situation, this item that I have is set to where you have to be at least a co-owner on the lot to be able to get access to it. Not only do you have to be a co-owner, but you have to be me at a co-owner because it's a private item. Before we get too far into all that, let's actually talk about what a co-owner is. So if you look at your housing lot, you'll actually get lot access information. This second ability here that you get, very similar with town owners, there's town access information. This is actually a lot access. In the lot access, you have different tabs. Your tab with access versus banned is very clearly labeled to understand. We want to grant people access to the lot, so we're going to put them in this list. So in this situation, I'm going to use Delaney Cloth as the example. And I'm going to say Delaney Cloth is going to be added to this lot. Once added, if I have locked doors, Delaney would be able to walk through the lot and get through it easily. If I don't have locked doors, not much has changed. There is one permission adjustment that if you do have permissions set a specific way, having somebody as a guest could help. That said, Guild Chapter House or locked doors is what the guest is really mostly in reference to. Having somebody as a guest does not give them access to any of your secured lots, nor does it give them access to getting into your containers that you have marked for kindred and above. The adding of items can be set to public, not to guest. But again, if you have locked doors, that also locks all your containers. So now you have to give somebody a guest to be able to get into your publicly added containers. So this is basically the most elementary access on the lot. They will never be able to take anything from you unless anybody can take it from you. It's important to note that there are a couple of things in this game that allow anybody to take something from you, namely the cash chest. The public cash chest, although it has permissions on it, cannot be modified to stop people from withdrawing items out of it at this time. Next tier in permissions is kindred. Kindred is that friend that you know you trust, but yet you don't want to give them the ability to grant their friends access to your lot. The kindred user is somebody who can get into your stuff if you set the proper permissions, but they cannot add a player to your access list. They also cannot remove a player from your access list. Additionally, you get a little bit of privacy as a kindred member on a person's lot because you can mess with decorations of your own. If you place a chest, you can mark it as private, and another kindred user would not be able to get into it. However, if you're a trustee, you can override a kindred's user. A trustee, the next level, is the type of a person that actually would be almost like a manager. They don't have the responsibility of the owner, but yet they're able to add and remove kindred users. They're also able to work with banning people. Trustees have a higher level of access that can overwrite permissions on equal tier and lower tier users. So in this situation, Delaney Cloth and Miyoshi Kiyosura are both trustees. So if Delaney Cloth was to set a box, mark it as private, and then Miyoshi goes up and right-clicks that box, they can remove that private access. If the private access is unable to be removed, they can set their permissions to overwrite the permissions on moving an item. Once they do that, they simply would move the chest, overwrite the permissions with their own permissions and then gain access. Trustees need to really be exactly what the name implies, trustworthy, because they're ultimately going to have access to everything on your lot. Not only that, but they can add other people who can get into your friends type access systems. Be very cautious on who you add as a trustee if you're going to be put real world value items, such as you see on my lot. All of my backer items and many of my add-on items are here. The trustees could theoretically take anything in this lot. Now, there's another permission yet even higher, and that's your co-owner. A co-owner is a person who can actually make other trustees. This is the person that you're basically saying is a peer with you as the owner of the lot. The only thing the co-owner is not able to do is to take down the house. The house itself is based on the plot, so they cannot take your plot out of your inventory. Nearly everything else they would have access to being able to do, including getting into your own chests that you've marked as private yourself. A co-owner can take the owner's chests that they've marked as private, move them, and gain access to them. So be very cautious if you're going to set somebody as a co-owner. So now that we've gone through what the different tiers are, and I've explained it verbally, let's show you how this works. This chest is following my default permission template when I drop it. If you notice, there's a lot more to the permission system than what exists on just the crafting station. There's item permissions, there's the privacy of this item, there's the container remove and modify of contents, there's the container add of contents, and there's the log of who's gone in and out of that. Now, I want to be very cautious here. This log is questionable to trust. I've had several situations where a container has kept its log even once placed into my inventory. I've had other situations where a container simply doesn't log information that has been put into it. This chest, for example, had over 20 items put into it, yet it only has record of 3 items coming in, 1 going out, 1 item going in, and 4 coming out. So if you do the math there, 4 items went in and 5 items came out. Kind of seems a little odd. The logs are not reliable, so again, you need to be very careful who you give access to your lot. More importantly, you need to be very careful who you give access to the contents of the containers on your lot. So this is where you get access to setting a kindred person to be able to remove contents from this chest, a public person to be able to add items to this chest. So in this situation, I've set this specific box up to where somebody who is me or a peer with me can have access to this because it's a private item. They also would have to be a kindred, and they would also have to be public. But I'm the owner of the lot, so at this point, only Delaney and I would have access to this chest. If I actually want to have these settings take control, I would have to unmark this item as private. Now, if you notice, the privacy is no longer green, and the option Make Item Private has come up. At this point, only a co-owner or myself would be able to move this trunk from its current location. However, a kindred or higher person could take items out of the trunk. Additionally, anybody would be able to add items to the trunk. If they can add items, that means they can also see what's in there. So, I talked about how you could move an item to be able to change its permissions. So once I move this, I have my items set up to reset all my permissions to exactly what I want. In this situation, you'll notice that all of my settings have just been reverted to how I originally placed that trunk. I find that when I'm walking around, if I forget to turn off my decoration mode, I can accidentally move a chest every so often. If you're not careful, moving a chest can sometimes reset your permissions. So I have all of my permissions set to be as high as possible. That said, the only thing I'm not setting to the highest position is adding items to a vendor. We'll get to that in a moment. So, how do you change it to where every time you move something you don't change the permissions? That's right here. When you set this setting, when to apply settings in your lot permissions options, that's down here in the permissions options menu, you'll notice that the very first setting, when to apply, gives this placing new items option. So the only time it's going to set this template of options is when you place that item down for the first time. Otherwise, if you're simply moving it, the settings won't be changed. To demonstrate, this will no longer be private. I'll turn my decoration mode on, and now when I check, it's still not private. Again, if I move that down to moving or placing items, I move it back, check again, and now it's private. All these settings are pretty straightforward to understand. The one thing I will note is that the order of these two menus, although it has been reported several times as a bug, including in a video demonstration, the order of these are not the same as the order of the options here. Many people accidentally set their settings incorrectly because they set this menu based on this menu. Verify the first time you place a chest before you actually start using it that the green highlights are in the correct position. The actual chest permissions are set off of these green highlights. Your permissions options are simply an XML file located on your local computer. It's important to note that these are not server-based permissions. If you move from one computer to another computer, all of these settings default back to the server's original. The server's original is to only have them when placing new items and to have most of the settings set at kindred. It also will not mark items private. It's important to remember that. If you change computers, the default template will be lost from any changes as if it was a fresh install. Okay, so we have items, item permissions. We also have the ability to set who can get in, who can come out. Now what about those vendors? Well, they're not much different. The only difference is they're a different type of container. So on a vendor, you simply have a different option list to where instead of adding items and removing items, you simply have a player vendor listing. The player vendor listing works identical to how your add and remove items inventory is. In this situation, I have mine set to kindred, so the people I've added to my lot as friends are able to list items. Additionally, some of my chests, including my mailbox, the people that I mark as friends would be able to get in and out and take things. Other people would be able to add things. That basically wraps up how the permission systems work. Remember, everything is a top-down priority. If somebody has a higher priority than another person, they can usually bypass everything. So if you're going to make somebody a trustee, make sure that they're worthy of being responsible for all of your kindred's property. The kindred people have often paid for what they're putting into the chest if you're sharing property between multiple people. Also, if you mark certain items as private, they'll simply be unusable. For example, if I was to mark this crafting station as a private crafting station, I would be the only one that could get up to it and use it, besides Delaney. Thank you for watching. This is Duke Violation. Make sure you subscribe if you have any questions. Feel free to ask Violation Cloth in the forums, Violation Cloth in the game.